Welcome to Donzi Tech. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through how you can start an Angular project from scratch. So before you start working on any Angular project, you need to make sure you have Node.js installed because you're going to use the Node package manager, which automatically comes with the Node.js once you install it on your system. So if you don't have Node.js, you can simply visit the website here, nodejs.org, to download the Node.js, then you install it on your machine. So you can simply choose the version of the Node.js you want. Okay, so you can always go with the recommended one, but if you want to try, you can just go with the current one. But I will recommend you use the 18.16. Okay, so you can just download it from here and then you install it on your machine and you continue with the process I'll be doing in the terminal. So I already have this downloaded, so I'm going to skip this process. So after you install Node.js on your machine, you can open your terminal. So CMD. You can type CMD in the search bar here, so CMD, or you can type command prompt. You can type node v to check the node version you have installed on your machine. So the node version I have is Node.js version 18.16. Okay, this is the version of node I have on my machine. Okay, so once you install the Node.js, then you get access to the npm. That's the node package manager. We'll be using it to install the libraries you'll be needing for the Angular. So we do npm install -g and then Angular /CLI. So we need to first install the Angular CLI before we can get access to using the commands in Angular. So I've already installed this, so I'm going to skip this process. But you need to type npm install -g, that's global, at Angular /CLI to install the Angular command line on your machine. So after you install the Angular CLI, you can do ng-v to check the version of the Angular CLI you've installed. Sorry, ngv. Okay, so this is going to give you the version of Angular you have. You have Angular 16, and then the node you also installed on your machine, and then the version of the node package manager, that's 9.5.1. Okay, so if you have this configured on your machine, then you can continue with the next process. So let me clear the screen here. So from there, you can use the commands in the Angular CLI to create your Angular project. So you can write ng new, then you give a space to write the name of the project you want to create. So you can do ng new, then this is our first project. So let me do first project. So this is going to take a while depending on your system and then your internet connection. But after this, I'm going to give you another approach you can use to speed up the project creation procedure the next time you want to work on any Angular project. So if you want Angular routing, you just type Y. If you don't, you just type N. Then you choose your preferred style sheet. I'm going to go with the CSS. So this is going to take a time to download the Angular packages into your project before you can get your project running. If you don't have those node modules on your Angular project, there's no way it's going to run. So you give it time to install. Alright, so after the project is created, you're going to get this message. If you don't have Git configured on your machine, it's going to ask you to configure your Git, but you can skip that procedure if you don't have any intention of uploading it on your GitHub account now. Alright, so I'm just going to close this window here. So I'll just clear the screen first. Oh, I mistakenly created this project in my username drive. Alright, so you can just do cd, the folder name you created your project. Okay, so inside I created a project. Let me first check. So you can always do dir to check the files and folders you have in that directory. So you can do the dir. And if you're on Mac or Linux, you can just do ls to get the same files and folders in your directory. So I created an Angular project, first project. So depending on where you created a project, it doesn't really mind. So I'm just going to do cd, then the project name, first project. So I'm now inside the project I created. So if I do dir, it's going to give you the files and folders you have in the Angular folder. All right. So if you are outside this Angular project folder, let me show that here. Then you run the command to start the server, engine serve. So you get this error. This command is not available when you are outside the workspace. Okay. So you can just do cd the first project. So anytime you get that error, it means that you are outside your project folder. So you need to make sure that you are inside your project folder before you run any command related to the Angular CLI. So you can do ng serve now. So if you do ng serve, this command to run the server in Angular. But you can choose to add -o. So if you add -o, it's going to open your browser automatically after it's done compiling everything for you. But then the actual command is ng serve to run the Angular server. Yeah, so this will open your default browser with the URL generated by the Angular. So by default, this is the port we are running on. So it's going to open that inside your default browser. So this is the URL to access your project locally. Right, so once you get this page running, it means you have everything set up. So you can go straight away to our VS Code or any other text editor you prefer using. So to break out from this server, I can just do Control C. So Control C will break the server for you. All right, so let me clear the screen. If you're using VS Code, you can write code and then space dot to open this current directory inside your VS Code for you. All right, so here, let me just trust this file and increase the font size a bit. I think 30 is too much. Let me do 20. All right. Okay, so when you are in your Angular projects folder, you are going to see these files. So these files, the only thing we need is the SRC folder. So by default, Angular is going to build one component for you. That's the app component. So this is your main component file, which will include your HTML, your CSS, your testing file, and then your TS file. All right. So we are going to look at what each file does. So the Angular routing here, this is used for creating path between your components in your Angular project. So if you want to create a path or any route in your Angular project, you need to use the app routing. So you are getting this file because initially when we created a project, I selected it should add Angular routing to it. And then you have your app.component.css file. So this CSS file is unique to only this HTML file. All right, and then we use this for unit testing. That's the app.component.spec.ts. We use this one for unit testing. And then app.component.ts file. So this is the main TS file used to manipulate our components. Okay, so any code you want to write related to the component you have created, you need to write that inside the app.component.ts. So inside here we have the selector. So the selector name is app-root. So the selector is just like a normal HTML element. So if you want to import this component in another component, you need to write the selector name inside that HTML file, just like you write a normal HTML element, h1, h2 in that order. And then template in Angular is just your HTML files. So template URL is just the path to the HTML file in your Angular project. So you can see that here inside the app we have, in the same directory we have app.component.html, and that's true, we have it right here, app.component.html. and then same for the URL, so style URL. So with this one we have an array, meaning you can have more than one CSS file for one project. Okay, so it takes in an array, so you can just bring a comma to add more style sheet to this component. Okay, and then this last file, that is the app.module.ts. So any module you import in your Angular project is going to automatically do this for you if you are doing it from your terminal. But if you want to do that manually, that means I have to type any component you create or any module you create or import directly inside the project here manually. And then if you are creating a component from your CLI, automatically import and then include everything for you. That's the beauty of the Angular CLI. All right. So from here we have another folder, that's the asset. So any asset file you want to use in your Angular project, you keep it inside this asset folder. And then you have one main HTML file here. So this index.html. So any component you create, you have to import that component inside this HTML file, app.component.html. And then remember, if you check here, you have a selector named approot. So I told you this approot is just the selector name for this component. So anywhere you want to use this component in your Angular project, you write the selector name in a form of writing an HTML element. So here in the index.html file, we have app-root. Okay, so this is how we import components in other HTML files. So it's, by default, Angular is going to import the main component you created, that's the app component, inside the index.html file. So if you create any other component in your project, you don't have to add it to this file, but then you rather add it to the app.component.html. We're going to see that shortly in real time. All right, and then we have this styles.css. So this styles.css file is just a global CSS. So any CSS you write here will automatically be added to all your Angular components. And then if you write it inside the component name, so app.component.css, if you see something like this, it means that it's only unique to the app.component.html. But then with the styles.css, so right here you can see it's global. So the comment here means that it's global, so it applies to all the components you have in your Angular project. So if you have any global CSS you want to write, you can do that inside the styles.css. But if you write it here, it's going to affect only this HTML file, not any other one. All right, so enough of this. I'm just going to remove the default HTML content inside the app.component.html. So select all, then I'll delete it. All right, so let me close off this app.module, and then let me get bootstrap and then use it here. So get bootstrap.com. I'm just going to scroll down here and then get the bootstrap links. So I'll first get the CSS and then back to the project. So I'll add this inside the index.html file because all the components will come inside here and they will be in the body. So you don't need to add it here. So if you add it here, it means that I'm going to create another HTML file. Then you're importing this HTML file inside this HTML file. So you're going to have the HTML opening and closing inside the body tag, which is wrong. That's not the structure for HTML. So you don't have to add it here, but I rather add it in the default index.html file created by the Angular. So remember back in HTML, to add CSS to your project, you use the link tag, then you specify you want a style sheet, but if you want icon, you write icon, but we need a style sheet, so style sheet. And then you write the path to your CSS file. So in this case, I just pasted the bootstrap CSS link here. So now let me get the JS file as well. So with the JS file, I'm going to use the script tag here and then paste it inside the SRC attribute. So you can do it this way, but then if your text editor doesn't predict for you, you can write script, go back again and write SRC. That's the source for your JavaScript file. So now I've added bootstrap to the project. All right, so let me get the bootstrap. Let me first write some content here to see if this project is actually working. So I'm first going to create a container class in bootstrap. Then I'll add a heading, take the text to the center, then welcome to Angular. All right, so now let me go back to the browser. Let me see if this terminal is running. So the command to run the server is ng serve. Okay, so now let me reload this page. Okay, so we have here welcome to Angular, which means the project is working. All right, So I'm going to create two components for my terminal using the Angular CLI. So engine, you can type generate component and then the name of the component you want to create. But let me clear the screen first. So engine generate component, then the component name. I want to create a navbar. So I'll write navbar. So this command is going to create a navbar component for you automatically. And then you can see here our app.model.ts is updated automatically. So Angular is going to do all the imports for you, so you don't need to worry about that. And then keep in mind, every component you create in Angular is going to have these 4 files: the HTML file, the testing file, the TS file, and then the CSS file for that particular component. So mostly the Angular CLI uses the names of the files to identify them. So we have navbar.component.css, which means it's unique to only this navbar.component.html file. All right. So let me create another component. So I'll do engine. You can also type generate, or you can do gen c. Then let me create, let's say, homepage. So engine generate component. That's the G stands for the generate, the C is the component name. So you can do it this first way I did, or you can use this initial to also run your Angular project. Right, so I have two components created. Let me run the server again. So I can keep this running, but let me go back to the terminal. So inside here, we have two more folders. So we have homepage folder, that's the component created, and then the navbar, which is also the component created. So by default, Angular adds a p tag in the component created. So let me open this navbar.html. So you're going to see navbar works. So any component you create, you're going to use the name of the component and will add works to it for you. All right, so let me check the homepage as well. So the homepage will give you homepage works and then inside your p tag. All right. So Angular is well structured in a way that any component you create from the terminal is going to automatically add it in a folder for you. So you don't need to create folders to organize your components and everything. Angular handles that for you. Let me close off this index and then this app. All right. So this is how the file works. So inside the SRC, you have your app folder. So inside the app folder, I'm going to have your components you are going to create. So now I have two more additional components. That's the navbar and then the home page. So the main component is the app component. All right. So here I'm going to add bootstrap navbar to this HTML file. I'm going to take off this p tag. Let me go back to the bootstrap documentation, navbar section. So I'm going to select the first one, but if you prefer any of the ones below, you can use that. I'm just going with this one. So let me paste this here. So let me change this to Angular. All right, so I'm not going to handle bootstrap here, but then container fluid means full screen. Container is going to keep some margins around the element for you. Okay, so home about, I don't need, okay, let me just maintain these ones to keep things simple. All right, so reload. All right, so here, anytime you create a component in Angular, they want it to be visible on the web page, you need to make sure you import it in the app.component.html, because the app.component.html component is the only thing that's being served on our browser. Okay, so we have the selector name here. So if you want your navbar component or any other component you create to render on the page, then you can keep that inside the app.component.html. So I'm going to get rid of this, then I'll import the navbar component here. And then remember earlier, every component has a selector name. So the navbar also has its own selector. It comes with the default app-navbar. Okay. So to use this component inside another HTML file, we just write the component name there, like a normal HTML element, maybe h2, h3, like that. So h3, any element you want to create. But then this time around, we are just passing the selector name as a normal HTML element. So less than then the component name like this. So this is how you import it. So now we have now imported the navbar component inside the app.component.html file. So if you check on the web page now, we have our bootstrap navbar running on the page, everything responsive as usual with the bootstrap. All right. So you can further customize this to look more nicer on your web page. Okay, but I'm not going to cover bootstrap in this session. So let me take this search bar off. I don't like it. Then this drop down to I don't like it. I'll take it off. Disabled link. I don't need disabled link. So let me just create copies of this. So in VS Code, you can just select this. You hold your Alt key, then Shift, use arrow key down to duplicate. Or you can go the traditional way. You select all, then you choose copy, then you paste. But then this is going to make you slow. All right. So I'm going to change this to about services portfolio, and then let me add one more. That's contact. All right, so let me check the web page now. So I have these links, so you can choose to keep the links in the middle. So to keep it in the middle, just remove the E, that's margin N to E, so that it will be margin auto. But I can do margin side, that's margin S, to take it to the side for you. All right, so I want to keep the links this way, and then by default, it's responsive because we are working with Bootstrap. All right, so I don't like this breakpoint. So if you don't like to break it on this type of screens, you can also change that in your VS Code. So I want to break it on medium screens, so MD, so that I will break on medium screens. But then you can choose whether you want SL, LG, or MD. But I prefer the MD, so you can choose depending on the content you have here and how it's looking on your web page. Okay, so I'm going to move straight to the home page component. Okay, so inside the home page component, I'm going to create a div here. Let me close this sidebar. So I'm going to create a div with an ID of home page. Alright, so I'm going to use the bootstrap class here, the container. Alright, so inside this container, I'm going to have one h2 here. I'll take the text to the center. Alright, home page. Alright, so let me select this inside the CSS file here. So remember, if I write this CSS inside navbar, it won't work unless I write it inside DSS. So the CSS created by Angular, when you create a component, is unique to only that component, as I said earlier on. Or else you can use the global CSS file here to make sure that the CSS will affect all the components. If you have a default style you want all your components to have, then you can write that inside the styles.cs. But I want this to be unique to only the home page component. So I'm giving it a background of indigo. Right, so let me give it a height of 100 VH so that it covers the whole screen for me. Yeah. So here I want to import this component also in my app.component.html file. So app, so that's the selector name on page. So if you want to cross-check the component or the selector name, you can just open the TS file of that particular component, and then you see the selector name there. Right, so now let me go back to my web page. So you can see I have the component here rendered on my web page. So Angular actually makes your web development more simple and easier. So this assuming you have multiple page website and you want to have a same navbar for all of them. You don't need to recode the navbar again. You can just write the selector name there. You write the selector name in the component you want. So let me just take this off here just to explain how it works. Then I'll keep the navbar inside the home page component. Okay, so you can see I still have the navbar. So if you have, let's say, about services contact pages, you can just include the selector name of the navbar to all those pages, so I don't need to recreate all of them. That's the purpose of the components created in Angular for you, to make things easier for easier debugging and testing of your project, because you have this unit testing file here for to test your individual projects. right? But if you have all the files in one project, just like you do with your normal HTML CSS website, right? So you notice that it's difficult when you are debugging your project or anything. But with the Angular, since they are in component base, you can check or test the individual components that comes together to form one single unit, right? So here I'm just going to move on to the next one. So you can create, let's say, a variable here. Let me take off the home page. This was just to explain to you how you can write CSS in your Angular. So the CSS you write here is unique to the home page component. If you write the CSS in navbar, it's unique to the navbar. But if you want it to be global, you write that in the global CSS file. All right. So here inside the home page, I'm just going to create an array here. So this array is just like normal arrays you have in JavaScript. But the only thing you do here is to reference or add a data type to the array you're going to create. All right, so let me create an array of, let's say, month. So I'm going to create a variable here, let's say month. Then you need to specify the data type. So if you want to accept a number, so I'm going to create an array. So I'll just do an array of numbers. Right, so if I do this, it means that this array should accept only numbers. So let me keep a string in it. So Angular is going to complain because this is not a number, because type string is not assignable to type number, because this is not a number. That's why I'm getting that error. So in the same way, if I assign a string to it or allow this array to accept strings, then I add a number or any other type data type aside strings, I'm going to get this error. Okay, so this is the beauty of the Angular, but then sorry, TypeScript. So you can choose to use any here. So if you put any, means that it's going to accept anything. That means anything goes. So you can write booleans, like any data type at all, because you said any. So that's the beauty of the any. But if you do any, I don't see why you should even keep that there, because you can go with the normal JS procedure if you don't want to specify a data type. But then this would be normal JavaScript. All right. So I'm going to create an array of month here, and I'm going to make it a string. So I'm going to pass a string to it. So since it's an array, I have to bring the square brackets there. But then if just a normal variable, then you can take away the square bracket. So this will only accept one value, just like a normal variable. But if you want to take an array, you bring the square bracket. Then you make sure it's assigned to an array. That's the square bracket. All right, so I'm going to have the months here. So January, February, sorry, quotation, so February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. Let me break this one like September, October, November, and then the almighty December. Alright, so I have this array of months here. So if I want to pass this variable to my HTML file, we need to use a technique called, or data binding technique called string interpolation. Alright. So with string interpolation, let me just keep the array here. So let me create another div here, row. So this is a class in Bootstrap. Let me do call LG places 6. I want to keep just on the side. So I'll just use the string interpolation here, then I'll write the variable name I created in the TS file, that's the month. Right, so now let me go back to the HTML file. I still have that CSS there. Let me comment this out. Alright, so I have the month January, February, March, but you can see it's just like a normal array. Right, so the beauty of the Angular is that you don't need to write or select the element in JavaScript like you do. Let maybe home page is equal to document or query selector, home page, then you do component or the selector name, that's maybe your home page, that's the variable you give. Let's say home page dot-inner HTML is equal to something, append something. Okay. With Angular, you don't need to do that. you just write or create a variable, then you directly put it in the element where you want to keep that. You don't need to select anything anywhere in your TS file. You just create a variable in your TS file and then you add it to your HTML. Right. So here I want to do something cool here. So I'm just going to take this off again. So I'm going to use the select tag in HTML. So select tag in HTML. Right, so I don't need this name attributes now. Right. So I'm going to use the option tag. So this is just like a normal list in HTML. If you want to create a list, maybe you can see maybe male. Then you can create another one. Let's say female. It's just like creating a normal list in your HTML file. So you can have, then you choose either male or female. And then we are going to do something cool with the array created in the TS file. But first, let me select the select tag in the CSS. Don't give it a width of 100%, a height of 50 pixels. Let me take the border of, let me give it a border of 1 pixel instead. So solid, let me make it indigo. Alright, I think I like indigo color. So let me take the outline of, so outline none. Let me give it a box shadow of 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 0.2. Right, then let me give it a color of indigo again. So if you have color picker installed in your VS Code, you can just reduce the opacity of the color you want. Alright, so let me go back to the browser and then check how it's looking. Wow, perfect. I think the opacity is too small. Let me increase that a bit. Okay, I think that's cool. I think the rem is too small. Let me give it 10 pixels. Okay, it's glowing nice. So let me add a border radius to it. So border radius, say 7 pixels. Okay, then let me give some paddings. So padding for the top and bottom 0, left and right, let's say 20. Let me see how it's looking. Okay, that's cool. So here I'm going to use a loop in. This will sound crazy, but then that's cool. You can write for loops inside your HTML file when you're working with Angular. Alright, so here let me give the user an option here, maybe choose month. Alright, so here I'm going to create another option here. So I'm not going to write anything, but then I'm going to use string interpolation to pass the values I'll be getting from the TS file here or the array here. So in Angular, you can use ng-for to create a for loop. Okay, so this is the new way of creating for loops in TS or in the ES6. That's the latest version of JavaScript. So you can also write this in JavaScript, which is valid. So you can write let, then this one is a variable, so I can say let x or something. But then let me choose month. So let month of the variable created in the TS file, that's month. Just like say for let x of something, or let's say for something is something you do in your normal Python file. So let month of month. Okay, so this is going to create duplicates of the individual items I have here. So it's going to look through everything. So month is going to represent the individual items you have in the array. Okay, so the same way you can use the string interpolation to show the values here. I want to display that also in the value section here. So now let me go back to the browser and then check. So select month, you can see we have the drop down here. We didn't create anything inside the HTML here. We just created one array. Then we look through the array inside the HTML file. So where the for loop is going to duplicate that particular element. Okay, and then the data passed through it will be dynamically sent to the HTML file from the array in your TS file. Okay, so you can just choose anything you want. So this makes your development much more easier. Alright, so that's one way you can use the for loop in your Angular project. So I'm going to walk you through another one. So let me keep the month somewhere. So I'm going to create an array of, let's say, users. So the array, let me assign it any. Right, so inside here, each user is going to be an object. So in JavaScript, this is how we create objects. So a user can have, let's say, a username. Let me assign John Smith to this, John Smith. User can have, let's say, a password. Let me do email address instead because I cannot just assign passwords to users. So let's say john@gmail.com, and then the user can have, let's say, age, let's say 50, gender, let me say male. Username cannot be this, so let me say full name. Let me add one on top here. Let me add it below. Username, say John. Alright. So here let me create another user. So since it's the same thing, I'm going to duplicate it. So remember in JS, these are object literals, just like you create dictionaries in Python. So you have keys, values, keys, values, keys, values. So the value can be anything. It can be an array. It can be anything. All right. I just want to assign this to it. Then you separate each object since it's inside an array with a comma. I'm going to change this to Mike Smith. Let me select this to Mike. So let me change the Smith to do. Okay, let me maintain do. Let me do. So same comma. And change this to Michael Queen. Let me do bright gray, bright gray, bright gray. Change this to bright, and then the username also to bright. Right, so I think this is okay, but you can add more objects to it. Right. So I'm going to fetch this same array inside the home page. Right, but I'm going to do something cool below here. I'm going to create a bootstrap grid. So first create the row. Right, so inside the row, I'm going to create 3 columns. So each column has to be 4. Okay, so it has to sum up to 12. Let me add some margins at the top. So 3. Okay. So LG4 means that on large screens we want 3 columns in a row. So 3, 4, 12. They all have to sum up to 12. So 4, 3, 12, 3, 4, 12. So on medium screens we want 2, 6 to 12, and then on small screens we want just 1. So SM12. Alright, so inside it I'm going to create another div here. I'm going to call this user. So this is the div I prefer. So the user, let me see the attributes added. So full name. So full name here. I'm going to pass the user the full name from the object to the HTML file. Then email address, age, gender, and then username. And I think I'll have to keep the username on top. Alright, so let me style this first. I'm going to keep them inside elements. So keep all of them inside an H2. Okay, so I'm going to start this quickly in the CSS file. I'm going to give it a box shadow first. So box shadow is 0 pixels, 6 pixels, 9 pixels. Let me choose a black color. Then if you have color picker installed, you can just reduce the opacity of the color or to suit the one you like. Alright, so I'm going to give it a border radius of 7 pixels, then a padding of let's say 20. Okay, I think that's cool. So now let me select all the H2s inside that. So H2, I'm going to change the font size to 20 pixels, and then the font weight to 400. Font weight 400. Alright, so let me check the web page. Okay, that's fine. Alright, so here I can duplicate this with the object I have in this array. So the same way asterisk engine for the for loop, engine for. So you can say let user of, let me see the variable name created, users. Okay, so this is going to create a duplicate here. So you can see it created some duplicate here. But then you can pass the attribute you have in the object to it. So you have dot full name dot email address. So the dot will give you access to the attribute you have in that object. So the same string interpolation here. So it will be the variable you created here, user dot, then the attribute name, full name. So you can always cross check. I think the F is lowercase. Then I swap that. So the first one will be username instead. So user dot full name, then email address, I think was user dot email underscore address. I missed one quotation, one curly bracket. So let me do that here again. So user dot gender. Let me take this out. H2 age, and then user dot age. Alright, I think this should get us running on the web page. Alright, so you can see we have the attributes here. Even though we had one HTML element, you can dynamically create multiple HTML elements on your web page. So you don't need to create more HTML codes. You can make use of your Angular. Well, alright. So basically this is just the intro to it, but then in subsequent videos we're going to talk about how you can share data between your components. Alright. So if you have, let's say, more than one component you want to share data with, let's say you have maybe users, you want to pass the total number of users to your navbar here, you cannot just pass it here. So you can either make the navbar a child of this home page. Alright, okay, so it's already a child here, so you can use the property binding to bind the users variable to it. So in later videos I'm going to talk about how you can do that. But then for now this is where I'm going to end. But if you have any questions, you can leave that in the comment section below, and then I'll attend to you.